this way was either the best or worst thing I've ever done for my reading life. Hello everyone and welcome to my channel. If you're new, my name is Gianna and welcome to my ongoing reading life experiment here at the McDonald Chronicles. Last year, frustrated with the lack of books I was reading, feeling like I was reading the same book, different title over and over and over again, I sort of decided to overhaul my reading life. I deleted Goodreads off of my phone, I canceled my Kindle Unlimited subscription, I made a list of just 25 books in different categories that I wanted to read for the year. I really focused more on kind of classics, books that have stood the test of time, nonfiction reads, things like that. Anything that I sort of considered to be a quality book. There have been some pros, but there have also been some unexpected cons. So let's discuss. Okay, so for the pros, the good thing is that almost all of the books I've read this year, I have really enjoyed. Some I've enjoyed so much that they basically put me into a book slump because I didn't think anything could match up. So things like The Way of Kings by Brandon Sanderson, my reread of Pride and Prejudice, rereading Harry Potter, Emily Wilde's Map of the Other Lands, The Abolition of Man by C.S. Lewis. All of those books I thoroughly enjoyed. I really enjoyed the fact that I had time for rereading books this year. But after I finished each one of those books in particular, I sort of didn't know where to go because I didn't think that any other book would ever kind of match up to that. Another pro is that most of the books made me feel something, like I was laughing, I was crying, I was definitely invested in the book. If it was a nonfiction book, I was pausing about, and honestly, even some of the fiction books, like Little Woman, I was like thinking about how I could apply some of that to my real life. Every time I finished a book, I wanted to talk about it with someone, so it was definitely not a passive experience. Whereas I feel like in past years, I've just kind of finished a book and gone right on to the next one. And again, it's like the same book, different title. I was just really invested in all of the books that I was reading, which was nice. And most of the books that I didn't have this sort of experience with weren't books that were on my 25 books that I wanted to read list. If I didn't have this experience with a book, it was like a random pickup. Maybe it was a book club choice. Maybe I just happened to stop by it in the library and I thought that would be great. I'll bring it home. Those are the books that sort of, if I went rogue, I guess you could say, those are the ones that maybe I didn't love as much. Another pro, which I think my library enjoys, is I stopped taking out, I used to literally go to the library in 2024 and take out at least 20 to 25 books at a time. I've taken out 50 books at once before, no joke, from the library. And I would take them out and then I would sort of come home and shuffle through them and then maybe read like 5 of them. But that's not really fair to the other library patrons, especially if I'm not reading the other 15, 20, 30, however many of them I have. So this year I really just, when I went to the library, I was looking for a specific book or I would take out like one random book. So that was really nice too. Also a space saver, which is great. So I did enjoy that. In short, reading this year was not a passive experience. I was super invested in what I was reading next, the books that I was reading. I enjoyed most of them. The quality was much better than it has been in previous years. Now let's talk about the unexpected cons. So first and foremost, I probably read about a quarter of the books that I read last year. I would say that's not necessarily a bad thing because quality over quantity, I think when it comes to books, is definitely better. However, I do feel like part of the problem is I haven't been prioritizing reading as much as I should have been this year, which I'm going to get into in a second. So I think that it's not just that I was only reading great books and those books took me a long time to get through. It's that I was also doing other things besides reading, which I don't really feel like I was doing as much the year before. Like I said previously, I went to the library and the bookstores a lot less this year, which is kind of a pro, right? Because I'm not just aimlessly wandering and spending money unnecessarily. But in the same vein, for me, it's kind of a con because I don't really know what's out there. I don't know what new books have really been released this year. And I don't necessarily think that the only quality books are classics and books that have been around forever and ever. I do think there are books that come out each year that are quality and are great to read. So truthfully, I have no idea what came out this past year and what people are reading, which is a pro and a con, I guess, depending on how you look at it. Sort of a really big unexpected con that I realized as I was reflecting on my reading this year is I sort of froze when it came to reading. So because I had this list of 25 books that I wanted to get through and because I had categorized them, because I knew they were really good books, every time I would go to read a book, if the book wasn't on my list, I was kind of like, well, why am I going to read that book? It's not on my list. And then I just wouldn't read anything. Instead of reading a book not on my list, I just wouldn't read a book at all. Or if I had time to listen to a book on audio, I would be like, you know what, I don't want to listen to this one on audio because I want to take notes on it. So I wouldn't read it again. I would do something else. And then sort of towards the middle of the year, I had this internal struggle of, oh, I've read too many of the fiction books on my list. I should really read some more nonfiction. And then I was only letting myself read the nonfiction books on the list, but then I wasn't really in the mood for nonfiction books at certain times. Then I wouldn't read anything, and I would just find myself like mindlessly scrolling, which is definitely not what we wanted. So where does that leave me for 2026? I'm just making a few changes. This is going to be a very busy year for me, so I'm not putting any restrictions on anything like that for what I'm doing this year. I am putting Goodreads back on my phone. And it's not to track the books I'm reading from a numbers perspective. It is just literally to track the books that I'm reading. So I tried this past year to do like a make your own Notion template, but for some reason, I just found it too cumbersome, like having to open up my computer or use the Notion app on my phone to go to the page that I needed, add the book, add a description. It just wasn't as user-friendly as I needed it to be. I'm in sort of this season where I need to just be able to like scan the book or take a picture of it or just type it in and say, yes, I finished it, and that's it. And same thing with my TBR list. Like there would be plenty of times when I was listening to a podcast or I'd be talking to someone and they would mention a book and I would be really interested in it and wanted to read it. But to me, opening up my Notion and going through all those steps again just was very cumbersome. So I did put Goodreads back on my phone, again, just to track the books that I've read, because truthfully, I don't know really. There are some books that stick out to me this year that I've read, but I really couldn't tell you every single book that I've read this year. And I do want a way to keep track of that. And I just know for myself, having the Goodreads app for that purpose is great. I also want it for the want to read list. I did clear out. So there's a way, if you do it on the computer on Goodreads, you can completely empty out your want to read list, which I did because I sort of wanted to start fresh. I've been building that want to read list probably for the last 10 years, and there are books on there that I'm no longer interested in reading, or maybe I've read and just haven't recorded it. So I completely deleted it. I just completely wiped it so that I could sort of start fresh with, here are the books that I've read this year. Here are the books that I know I'm really interested in reading. So if I ever find myself sort of in a slump, I can go to that list and know that any book that I pick off of that list will be one that I want to read. Versus before, I felt like if I went to that list, there were some books in there that I really didn't want to read anymore, but I didn't have the time to go through. I thought I would have to go through individually and clear it out. So I'm happy that I got to just sort of wipe the list and start over. The second thing that I'm doing differently this year is last year I made myself a categorized list. I'll see if I can like put some footage of that in here, but essentially I made myself a list of 5 or 6 different categories of books. I put 5 books in those categories or a series of books, things like that. And then I made a plan for myself of which month I would read each book. It was very pretty. I had a lot of fun making it, but truthfully, it was way too restrictive. And I think that kind of hindered me a little bit this past year because I would see this pretty list and be like, I spent all this time making it, I color coded it, et cetera, and now I don't want to read anything on it at this exact moment. So instead, I sort of have a stack. I got some books for Christmas, again, my Goodreads list, and I have some books that I haven't read yet. So I have a stack of books that I'm going to go through, and I'm going to do it off of 3 categories. So there is this parents review article. If anyone is familiar with Charlotte Mason, she's kind of a big name in the homeschool world, but there's a parents review article which basically discusses a woman having 3 books. And she basically attributes the fact that she can read so much to her having 3 books going at one time. And each of these 3 books fall into different categories. So the first is like a stiff book. To me, a stiff book is like a nonfiction book. A book I'm going to be learning something from. Maybe it's a book that's just like really, really challenging and I really have to think about it when I'm going through it. For me, mostly this stiff book category will be nonfiction. The second one is a moderate book. So again, one that maybe you don't have to spend a lot of time going through, one that's maybe a little bit more challenging to read through. Maybe you can only get a few pages done at a time. You kind of have to think about it, things like that. So for myself, all of my moderate books are actually going to come from, at least I think most of them are going to come from this book right here. So if you haven't heard of this book, this is The Well-Educated Mind by Susan Weisbauer. And I got this book actually last year for Christmas, but just started reading it in the past couple of months. Basically how this book is divided, it's sort of to give yourself a classical education. I didn't go to a classical school, and some of these books I've read, but I definitely didn't have a classical education, and it is something that I'm interested in. Basically how this book is divided is she sort of talks about kind of the pedagogy of it in the first maybe 50, 60 pages. And then the rest of the book, so a huge chunk of the book, is her just taking you through different genres and different time periods and sort of walking you through reading different books and how to read those books and what to do the first time you're reading them to become, more classically educated. So the first section is fiction. And what I really like about it is that each section goes chronologically. So you're kind of seeing the evolution of writing of that genre as it goes on. For the rest of the year, I anticipate all of my moderate books coming from essentially the reading list in this book. And then the last category is novels. This is like my free reading space. This is the books that I'll be reading before bed. They'll be like my book club books. It could be things like rereading. I don't know if you can tell, but I have like a wired microphone hooked up and my dog literally just ran through the whole thing. So where was I? Oh, novels. So novels for me, again, are things, they might be things like maybe on John Senior's 1,000 book list, just depending on what they are, like things like Pride and Prejudice, or I'm reading through Narnia right now. Mystery books like Agatha Christie, anything for my book club. So really, it's kind of like a fair game category to me. I consider novels to be like a free space. And I think one of the things for myself too is like I tend to get through this pile the fastest, and I think that's okay. I definitely had a decent amount of nonfiction on my list last year, and I just wasn't making it through them. And I think that was sort of stressing me out. But having these 3 categories going, I've been doing this honestly for the past few weeks, and I can already see it's making a huge difference. I try and get my nonfiction and my moderate book, like at least a chapter or a few pages read every morning. But if I don't get to it, I know that if I'm in the mood to read it at night, I can obviously do that as well. And so it just sort of gives me 3 books that I can reach for depending on the mood that I'm in and what I want to be reading and sort of the time I have, right? Like I'm probably not going to read a stiff book right before bed if I'm kind of tired, because I'll probably read 1 page and it'll put me to sleep, versus I probably could read a novel right before bed because it might be a little bit more entertaining and maybe hook my attention just a little bit more. And then the last thing I'm doing this year is really just sort of setting up a reading routine. So I got so far off base from my reading routine last year because I was so concerned about what I was reading necessarily, not the am I making time to read. And I am in a very busy season of life, but I'm not in a season that's too busy to read. Because if I have time to scroll Pinterest, I have time to read a book. So really what I want to do this year, and I've been working towards it the past few weeks, just sort of reestablishing that reading routine. Things like not leaving the house without a book. And this one seems sort of silly because when you have kids, there are very few places you can go with a kid where you're just going to sit there and read your book when they're young, right? When like you have to have your eyes on them at all times because they will just scale a building. But at least having it, I know that if something happens and I have a spare 2 minutes, or I'm stuck in a line like for grocery pickup or whatever it is, I know that instead of picking up my phone, I have a book. My husband made a comment today. He's like, "Why are you bringing a book? Like you're not gonna have time to read this book." And I didn't even open it. However, I brought it. So if the moment ever presented itself, I had a book with me. Things like listening to audiobooks on my commute, or maybe if I'm getting ready in the morning, listening to an audiobook. It's not something I'll do every day, but something that I definitely want to put back into practice that I've gotten away from. And then also reading before bed. So I've definitely kind of fallen into the trap of doing some scrolling before bed as opposed to reading before bed. And I've really tried the past couple of weeks to get back into the reading before bed zone. I got a fun little portable reading lamp in my stocking for Christmas, so that has helped, because truthfully, part of the problem was I've been reading books. I haven't had a lot of ebooks that I'm reading, and in order to do that, I have to have lights on. And when everyone's sleeping and I'm awake, I'm not able to have the lights on. So having the reading lamp helped with me waking up in the middle of the night and not scrolling my phone. I'll read a couple pages instead, or if I wake up really early, I can read instead, or if I'm kind of going to bed later than everyone else, I can read instead. I do sleep. It sounds like I'm not sleeping based on the last sentence, but just in those moments when maybe I would reach for my phone, instead of reaching for my phone, I'm reaching for a book, and it can be dark, and that's fine because I have a light. It works great. I'll truthfully link it down below because I am obsessed with it. It has like a warm and cool setting. So I use the warm setting at night so it's not like in your face. Anyway, enough about reading lamps. So that's how my reading went in 2025 and some changes that I'm making in 2026. I hope you'll stick around to see how this unfolds. I'm excited to be back. I'm excited you're here. And let me know what your reading goals for this year are in the comments and how your last year of reading went. Cheers.